The kitchen was a battlefield. Flour coated every surface like a thin layer of snow, and sugar sparkled faintly in the fluorescent light. Bowls, whisks, and spoons lay scattered across the countertops, alongside jars labeled with ominous names like Hellfire Extract and Nutmeg of Doom. In the center of it all stood Jeff, wearing a frilly pink apron over his usual cape, his crimson skin dusted with flour and a look of fierce concentration on his face. Arthur stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression teetering between exasperation and disbelief. "Jeff, what are you doing?" Jeff didn't look up, vigorously stirring a glowing batter in an oversized mixing bowl. "Arthur, my dear mortal companion, I am creating history." Arthur stepped cautiously into the chaos, dodging a rolling pin that mysteriously rolled itself across the floor. "It looks more like you're creating a disaster." Jeff paused, turning to face Arthur with a theatrical flourish of his whisk. "Nonsense. This is the dawn of a glorious era. The Kazoo Appreciation Society shall rise, fueled by the profits of my infernal bake sale." Arthur blinked. "You're hosting a bake sale? To fund a kazoo club?" Jeff nodded solemnly. "Indeed. Mortals appreciate baked goods. They appreciate kazoos. It's a natural pairing." Arthur rubbed his temples. "First of all, no one appreciates kazoos. Secondly, you promised, no cursed ingredients." Jeff waved his free hand dismissively, nearly knocking over a jar of glowing green sugar. "Relax, Arthur. These are merely enhanced ingredients." Arthur's eyes narrowed as he pointed to the jars. "What exactly is Hellfire Extract?" Jeff grinned. "A delightful spice that adds a little kick to the flavor. Perfect for cookies." "And Nutmeg of Doom?" Arthur pressed. Jeff held up the jar proudly. "It's nutmeg, with a hint of existential dread." Arthur groaned, stepping over a suspicious puddle of melted butter. "You can't sell cursed cookies to unsuspecting people." "Who said anything about curses?" Jeff replied, his tone innocent but his grin far too mischievous. "They're just unique. People love unique." As Jeff continued to work, Arthur couldn't help but marvel, begrudgingly, at the spectacle. Jeff moved through the kitchen like a mad scientist in a lab, tossing pinches of glowing spices into mixing bowls and chanting dramatic phrases like, "a pinch of chaos," or "a dash of delight." At one point, Jeff brandished a glowing spoon like a wand and muttered, "Rise, my glorious batter, rise." The dough obediently puffed up, glowing faintly as it did. Arthur watched in equal parts horror and fascination. "Do you even have a recipe?" Arthur asked. Jeff chuckled. "Arthur, my creations are not bound by mortal constraints like recipes. They come from the soul." Arthur gestured at the floating bowl of frosting Jeff had just enchanted to stir itself. "It looks like they're coming from the depths of hell." "Exactly," Jeff exclaimed, clearly taking it as a compliment. Jeff's piece de resistance was a massive batch of cookies. They were kazoo-shaped, with intricate designs piped in shimmering, glowing icing. Each one radiated a faint hum, as though it were vibrating with unspent energy. Arthur picked up one of the cookies cautiously, holding it at arm's length. "What is this humming?" Jeff grinned. "That's the magic. It adds a pleasant buzz to the experience, completely harmless." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Define harmless." Before Jeff could answer, he popped one of the cookies into his mouth, chewing dramatically. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his eyes glowed faintly, and his feet lifted an inch off the floor. Arthur's jaw dropped. "You're floating." Jeff swallowed, landing lightly back on the floor. "See? Harmless. A bit of levitation never hurt anyone." "That is not harmless," Arthur snapped, snatching the cookie jar away from him. "You're not selling these to people." Jeff crossed his arms. "Arthur, do you want the Kazoo Appreciation Society to thrive or not?" "I'd rather not have a bunch of people floating around the community center," Arthur shouted. Despite Arthur's protests, Jeff moved on to his next creation, cupcakes. Each one was decorated with a swirl of frosting that shimmered like molten gold. Jeff added tiny edible kazoo toppers to each cupcake with great care, stepping back to admire his work. Arthur peered at the cupcakes suspiciously. What do these do? Jeff shrugged. I'm not entirely sure yet. Probably nothing. Arthur didn't believe him for a second. The final touch was a towering cake, its layers stacked high and frosted with a mixture that glowed softly in the dim kitchen light. Jeff added a swirling pattern of red and gold frosting to the top, muttering incantations under his breath. Arthur leaned against the counter, watching warily. What's this one's gimmick? Jeff smirked. It's a surprise. Arthur groaned. I hate surprises. As Jeff packed the baked goods into enchanted self-sealing boxes, he turned to Arthur with an uncharacteristically serious expression. Arthur, my dear friend, this bake sale is more than just a fundraiser. It's a chance to bring joy, to share the wonders of kazoo culture with the world. Arthur stared at him, unimpressed. It's a chance to cause chaos and possibly get us banned from the community center. Jeff grinned. Exactly. Now help me carry these to the car. As they loaded the last box into the car, Jeff turned to Arthur with a gleam in his eye. Tomorrow, Arthur, the world will taste the magic of my creations. Arthur muttered under his breath, already dreading what magic might entail. The community center buzzed with activity as volunteers set up tables, strung festive banners, and arranged trays of baked goods under the soft glow of overhead lights. A cheerful hum filled the air as customers strolled in, clutching reusable tote bags and scanning the tables for treats. And then there was Jeff. His bake sale booth stood like a glittering beacon amid the modest displays of muffins and brownies. A massive banner overhead read, "Demonic Delights," in fiery lettering that shimmered and shifted, making the words look alive. The table itself was draped in a black velvet cloth, adorned with tiny glowing orbs that floated just above its surface. Plates of kazoo-shaped cookies, shimmering cupcakes, and slices of his glowing tiered cake were arranged in perfect symmetry, each radiating faint energy. Arthur stood behind the table, arms crossed and looking every bit like a man who had resigned himself to impending disaster. Jeff, this looks conspicuous. Jeff, dressed in a red blazer with golden embroidery that gave him the air of a demonic ringmaster, adjusted one of the floating orbs. Arthur, presentation is everything. No one wants boring treats from a boring table. They want spectacle, drama, and flair. Arthur gestured toward the kazoo centerpiece, a large edible kazoo made entirely of chocolate that occasionally emitted a faint hum. And this is flair? Jeff grinned. It's art. As the doors opened and customers began to wander over, Jeff blew a triumphant note on his actual kazoo, drawing immediate attention. Welcome, mortals, to the most enchanting bake sale of your lives, he announced, his voice booming with theatrical gusto. Arthur cringed. Could you tone it down? These are PTA moms, not carnival goers. But it was too late. A curious crowd had already gathered, drawn by the glowing desserts and Jeff's over-the-top charisma. A young boy tugged on his mother's sleeve, pointing at the kazoo cookies. Mom, look, they're glowing. Jeff crouched down to the boy's level, holding out a cookie with a flourish. Indeed they are, young mortal. Each cookie is infused with the essence of joy. Arthur whispered urgently, Stop saying things like that. The mother hesitated, but eventually bought a small bag of cookies. Jeff handed them over with a dramatic bow. Enjoy your purchase, and may your day be as delightful as a kazoo solo. It didn't take long for the baked goods enhancements to show themselves. The young boy who ate a kazoo cookie immediately let out a small yelp as his feet lifted off the ground. His mother screamed, grabbing his arm as he hovered a foot in the air. Jeff clapped his hands. Look at that! A cookie so light, it defies gravity. Arthur rushed to pull the boy down, glaring at Jeff. This is exactly what I warned you about. Meanwhile, a teenager who tried one of the shimmering cupcakes began glowing faintly in the dim room. She squealed with delight, snapping selfies and declaring, I'm like a human glow stick. Jeff leaned against the table, clearly pleased with himself. Arthur, look at these happy customers. This is exactly what the bake sale is about. Memorable experiences. Arthur groaned. They're going to call the cops. Nonsense, Jeff replied, gesturing toward a PTA mom who had just bought a slice of the glowing cake. They're enchanted by the magic of my culinary expertise. The mom took a bite and paused as faint mist began to swirl around her head. She fanned the air, looking bewildered but oddly calm. It's refreshing? Arthur threw up his hands. Refreshing? Jeff, this isn't normal. Normal is boring, Jeff quipped, handing a kazoo cookie to a curious toddler. Just as the crowd grew larger and the effects of Jeff's creations became more noticeable, a figure stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the room. He was tall and imposing, dressed in a sleek black suit with crimson accents that shimmered faintly. His slicked-back hair and piercing silver eyes gave him an air of polished menace. He approached Jeff's booth with slow, deliberate steps, his sharp shoes clicking against the floor. "Jeff," the figure drawled, his voice smooth and mocking. "Still peddling your amateurish nonsense, I see." Jeff straightened, his grin widening. "Malakai? What a pleasant surprise. Come to admire greatness?" Malakai smirked, glancing at the glowing cupcakes and humming cookies. "Greatness? Hardly. This sideshow is an insult to true infernal artistry." Arthur leaned closer to Jeff. "Who is this guy?" "Malakai," Jeff whispered back. "A rival demon and self-proclaimed culinary elitist. He's been bitter ever since I beat him at a chili cook-off in the Netherrealm." Arthur blinked. "There's a demonic chili cook-off?" Jeff nodded. "Of course. Very competitive." Malakai interrupted their exchange, snapping his fingers to conjure a tray of pastries. Each one gleamed with an almost hypnotic glow, their surfaces swirling with patterns that seemed to move. "Let's see if your ridiculous kazoo cookies can compete with these." The crowd gasped as one of Malakai's pastries floated into the air, spinning gracefully before landing back on the tray. Jeff clapped slowly. "Impressive. But where's the soul, Malakai? Where's the fun?" He gestured toward his cookies. "Mine play music." Malakai sneered. "Music doesn't make up for mediocrity. Let's settle this properly. A bake-off. Right here. Right now." Jeff grinned, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Challenge accepted. Prepare to be amazed." Arthur groaned, already anticipating the chaos that was about to unfold. The crowd cheered as Jeff and Malakai squared off, the air buzzing with tension and faintly glowing sugar. The air in the community center was alive with a buzz that rivaled the hum of Jeff's glowing kazoo cookies. Parents shuffled closer, shielding their children while trying to catch every word of the showdown. The smell of sugar and burnt chocolate hung heavy, and even the fluorescent light seemed brighter, as if anticipating the spectacle to come. Arthur stood to the side, gripping his clipboard as though it were a lifeline. "A bake-off? Really? This is how we're solving this? What's next? A demonic pie-eating contest?" Jeff ignored him, meticulously tying his frilly pink apron over his blazer. "This, Arthur, is not just a bake-off. It's the bake-off. The stakes are higher than the frosting on my triple-decker kazoo cake." Malakai stood on the opposite side, arms crossed and smirking like a villain who had already won. "You've always been delusional, Jeff. Today, you'll learn what true artistry is." The crowd gasped. Whispers rippled through them like waves. Someone muttered, "Who's going to stop him if he loses?" A child tugged on their mother's sleeve, pointing at Jeff's table. "I hope the kazoo guy wins. His cookies made me float." Arthur groaned, rubbing his temples. "That's not a good thing." The mother waved her glowing cupcake in appreciation. "I thought it was delightful." Malakai stepped forward, every move deliberate, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. "We'll settle this in 3 rounds. Creativity, presentation, and, of course, taste. I trust your creations will at least amuse the judges before I annihilate you." Jeff snapped his kazoo against his palm like a battle-ready general. "You're about to witness the raw power of kazoo-inspired culinary genius." Arthur muttered, "This is going to be a disaster." Malakai took his place at his table, snapping his fingers. Ingredients appeared mid-air as if conjured from the ether. Glowing eggs, molten chocolate, and jars of shimmering sugar spun in perfect synchrony. His movements were fluid, his technique impeccable, as he crafted his soul tarts. When they emerged from the oven, the tart surfaces shimmered with deep crimson and gold swirls. They pulsed faintly, the glow drawing the judges like moths to a flame. As one judge leaned closer, a soft, mournful hum escaped from the desserts, growing louder until it filled the room. The crowd shivered, the eerie sound prickling their skin. A woman clutched her chest, whispering, "I feel like I'm reliving my wedding day." One judge took a cautious bite, her eyes glistening. "It tastes like my happiest memory." Arthur muttered, "Jeff, we're doomed." Jeff waved him off, already hurling ingredients into a spinning bowl with reckless abandon. "He's peaking early, Arthur. Classic mistake. Amateurs always overcompensate." Jeff's workspace looked less like a baking station and more like a tornado of chaos. Flour exploded like fireworks, and eggs cracked mid-air, their contents landing in the bowl with surprising accuracy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jeff bellowed, juggling glowing sugar cubes, "prepare yourselves for the culinary experience of a lifetime." When the cupcakes emerged from the oven, each was crowned with shimmering frosting and a tiny, edible kazoo. But Jeff wasn't done. With a snap of his fingers, the cupcakes began to hum and vibrate, the kazoo toppers producing a hilariously off-key rendition of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." The crowd erupted into laughter, clapping along with the absurd tune. Children danced in circles, mimicking the kazoo noises, and one judge laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. This is pure joy," she exclaimed, glowing faintly as she took another bite. Malakai's smug expression faltered as the crowd cheered. Jeff leaned back, crossing his arms. "It's not about the memory, Malakai. It's about the moment." If Malakai had been rattled in the first round, he didn't show it. With a dramatic wave of his hand, a dark cloud swirled above his table. From the depths of his mixing bowl rose a towering chocolate spire, its glossy surface gleaming like obsidian. Lightning crackled along its edges, and the low rumble of thunder filled the room. The crowd gasped, some stepping back as if the dessert might explode. A PTA mom whispered nervously, "It's beautiful, but terrifying." Arthur leaned toward Jeff. "What's your plan?" "You can't out-intimidate that." Jeff adjusted his apron. "Charm, Arthur. Charm wins hearts." Jeff revealed his piece de resistance, a multi-layered cake frosted with glowing patterns that shifted and danced like liquid light. With a wave of his kazoo, the cake began to spin slowly, releasing a fine, glittering mist that hung in the air like stardust. The cake hummed softly, the sound soothing the crowd and drawing them closer. A teenager gasped, "It's like a disco ball, but edible." Even the judges, who had been nervously eyeing Malakai's spire, couldn't resist the cake's whimsical allure. Their pens moved furiously across their notepads, clearly torn between intimidation and enchantment. The judges approached Malakai's table first. His spire revealed a molten core, its contents oozing onto their plates like liquid gold. They hesitated, their hands trembling slightly, before taking cautious bites. "It's intense," one judge said, her voice faint. "It feels like it's judging me back." Arthur frowned. "That's unsettling." When the judges moved to Jeff's table, he greeted them with a kazoo fanfare. "Prepare your taste buds for a symphony of flavor," he declared, handing them slices of glowing cake and kazoo cookies. The judges' reactions were immediate and unanimous. Smiles spread across their faces, one judge clapping her hands in delight. "It's whimsical, fun, and somehow delicious." The crowd cheered as Jeff took a bow, flashing Malakai a victorious grin. "Looks like I hit all the right notes." Malakai wasn't done. With a snap of his fingers, a glowing vial of cursed syrup appeared. He flung it across the room, shattering it over Jeff's desserts. The syrup glowed ominously, and a faint hiss filled the air as the desserts began to crackle. The crowd gasped, and Arthur yelled, "Hey, that's cheating!" Jeff grinned. "Oh, it's on now." With a clap of his hands, Jeff enchanted his desserts. Kazoo cookies sprouted tiny legs, marching across the table like a miniature army. The glowing cake tilted forward, firing bursts of glittering mist at Malakai's tarts. Malakai's spire cracked under the assault, sending shards of molten chocolate flying. His tarts floated into the air, pelting Jeff's cupcakes with crumbs that exploded like fireworks. The room descended into chaos. Children screamed with glee, parents dove for cover, and frosting splattered across every surface. Arthur crouched behind the table, yelling, "Jeff, control your desserts!" Jeff laughed, standing amidst the chaos with his kazoo raised high. "Never. This is art in motion." Amid the chaos, the judges threw up their hands, retreating to safety. Malakai growled, his form flickering with rage. "This isn't over, Jeff." Jeff stood tall, frosting smeared across his cheek, his kazoo raised like a sword. "It is so over." The crowd alternated between cheers and screams as the bake-off descended into legendary absurdity, promising a finale no one would forget. The room was chaos, pure and unrelenting. Frosting painted the walls, syrup dripped from the ceiling, and enchanted desserts waged war in a spectacle of sugary destruction. Parents scrambled for cover behind overturned tables, pulling their giggling children close. Arthur crouched behind Jeff's station, clipboard held like a shield. "Jeff, this is out of control. You're going to get us banned from reality." Jeff, perched atop his table like a victorious general, raised his kazoo triumphantly. "Arthur, my dear companion in chaos, this isn't destruction. It's dessert theater. The people love it." Indeed, the crowd was torn between screaming and laughing. A group of kids danced around a cluster of glowing cupcakes, chanting, "Kazoo! Kazoo!" while a PTA mom held up her phone, live-streaming the madness. "I've never seen anything like it," she whispered, frosting splattered across her glasses. "This is going viral." Across the room, Malakai stood amidst the debris of his once intimidating desserts. His molten chocolate spire had collapsed under the relentless assault of Jeff's enchanted cupcakes, and his floating tarts spun aimlessly in the air, their once menacing hum reduced to pitiful squeaks. His sleek, polished demeanor was gone, replaced by a wild-eyed glare. "You've made a mockery of this competition, Jeff," he growled, his voice shaking with fury. Jeff smirked, hopping down from his table. "Mockery? Malakai. This is art in motion. The people love a little chaos." Malakai's eyes narrowed. "Let's see how much they love this." With a snap of his fingers, Malakai summoned a swirling vortex of cursed ingredients, shards of blackened sugar, glowing crimson syrup, and what looked like powdered despair. The vortex condensed into a single vial, which Malakai flung toward Jeff's table with a dramatic flourish. The vial shattered, releasing a misty rain of dark energy that coated Jeff's desserts. The cupcakes faltered, their kazoo tune dropping into a distorted, mournful drone. The glowing cake wobbled, its light dimming as the cursed syrup seeped into its layers. The crowd gasped, their excitement turning to unease. A woman in the front row clutched her glowing cupcake, which now emitted a faint, unsettling hum. "Is it supposed to do that?" she whispered, her glow flickering. Arthur sprang to his feet, pointing an accusing finger at Malakai. "Hey, that's cheating." Malakai sneered, his form flickering with dark energy. "There are no rules in war, mortal." Jeff didn't miss a beat. He raised his kazoo high, blowing a sharp, triumphant note that echoed through the room. "To me, my confectionery comrades," he bellowed. The enchanted desserts rallied with renewed vigor. The cupcakes straightened, their kazoo toppers resuming their off-key tune with a defiant squeal. The glowing cake tilted forward dramatically, firing bursts of glittering mist that cut through the cursed syrup, restoring its luminescence. "Jeff!" Arthur yelled, dodging a stray frosting projectile. "Control your desserts before someone loses an eye." "Control," Jeff said, grinning as his cupcakes marched in formation. "Arthur, this is what we call improvisational baking." The cupcakes charged toward Malakai's tarts, kazoo music blaring like a battle cry. The tarts tried to retaliate, spinning wildly and flinging crumbs like shrapnel, but they were no match for the sheer absurdity of Jeff's creations. One cupcake leapt onto a tart, its kazoo letting out a victorious squeak as the tart exploded in a puff of glitter. As the chaos reached its peak, Malakai made one last desperate move. He raised his hands, summoning another dark vortex. This time, it coalesced into a towering chocolate monstrosity, a massive, multi-layered cake with glowing red veins that pulsed ominously. The crowd fell silent, the air heavy with tension. Arthur's jaw dropped. "Jeff, do you have anything that can top that?" Jeff's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Oh, Arthur, always save the best for last." He clapped his hands, and his glowing cake began to transform. Layers shifted and expanded, frosting shimmering like liquid gold. The cake rose higher, its glow intensifying until it outshone Malakai's creation. The air filled with the soft, melodic hum of kazoo music, harmonized and eerily beautiful. The crowd gasped, their unease replaced by wonder. A teenager whispered, "It's like the Northern Lights, but edible." Jeff blew one final kazoo note, and the glowing cake released a burst of light that filled the room. Malakai's chocolate monstrosity crumbled under the brilliance, collapsing into a harmless pile of cocoa dust. Malakai stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the light. "This isn't possible," he snarled, his form flickering. "You're nothing but a clown." Jeff grinned, stepping forward. "A clown? No, Malakai. I'm an artist, and like any great artist, I know how to deliver a finale." With a dramatic spin, Jeff blew the opening notes of the Ghostbusters theme on his kazoo. The enchanted desserts synchronized their movements to the tune, forming a parade that marched triumphantly around the room. The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping and laughing as frosting and glitter rained down like confetti. As the light faded and the desserts returned to their tables, the judges emerged from their hiding place, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. One judge stepped forward, raising her clipboard. "The winner is clear," she announced, her voice trembling. "Jeff and his kazoo army." The crowd roared as Jeff took a bow, frosting smeared across his cheek like war paint. Arthur approached him, shaking his head. "I don't know how you did it, but you actually pulled it off." Jeff shrugged, handing Arthur a glowing cupcake. Never doubt the power of kazoo-fueled genius. As the crowd dispersed, parents carrying glowing cupcakes and kids chanting kazoo tunes, Arthur surveyed the frosting-covered room with a heavy sigh. "We're definitely not getting our deposit back." Jeff slung an arm around Arthur's shoulders, grinning. "Worth it." As the lights dimmed and the community center fell quiet, a single kazoo note echoed through the air, carrying with it the memory of the most chaotic bake-off ever witnessed.